Saturday, March 22nd at 7:30 p.m. Tickets available at floridatheater.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, a measles outbreak offers the first test of vaccine skeptical Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We discuss Florida's first recorded case and all the latest medical headlines on our monthly house call with Dr. Joe. Then, Jacksonville University Law School celebrates its first ever graduating class. We talk to the school's dean and several students about what it means to enter the legal field at this turbulent time. And a 1920s musical, Gangsters and a Drunken Chaperone. We talk to the folks behind the Limelight Theater's new stage production. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. It's all ahead this hour after today's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. U.S. Special Counsel Hampton Dellinger has once again been removed from his position at the federal watchdog agency. As NPR's Andrea Hsu reports, his removal comes as he was leading an investigation into the firings of federal probationary employees.
Special Counsel Dellinger's request for a stay and the terminations of nearly 6,000 employees of the U.S. Department of Agriculture had just been granted when an appeals court in Washington, D.C. sided with the Trump administration and removed him from office for the second time. The move doesn't affect the order to reinstate fired USDA workers for 45 days, but it could affect what else the Office of Special Counsel does going forward. Already, attorneys have submitted evidence to show probationary employees were improperly fired across the government. Dellinger called on all agencies to voluntarily reinstate probationary employees they'd fired since mid-February and not wait for an order. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
Britain's defense secretary is in Washington. He's expected to try to convince the Trump administration to reinstate aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. NPR's Lauren Frayer reports from London.
The Trump administration's pause on aid and intelligence sharing to Ukraine affects some of the weapons Britain has given that country, including long-range Storm Shadow missiles, which Ukraine is now unable to use as effectively without U.S. intelligence that helps with targeting. The Trump administration wants Europe to pay for more of its own security, including Ukraine. Britain was among the first to step up, boosting its own defense spending. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has also offered to send British peacekeepers to Ukraine as part of a possible ceasefire, but he wants a U.S. backstop for their safety. UK Defense Secretary John Healey is discussing all of this in Washington with his U.S. counterpart Pete Hegseth. Lauren Frayer, NPR News, London.
President Trump has given the big three U.S. automakers a one-month reprieve on his 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada. The high tariffs will stay in place for most other goods. The automakers had asked that the Trump tariffs not apply to parts or cars that met the requirements of a trade agreement among the three countries. The trade agreement replaced the old NAFTA accord. NPR's Camila Dominowski says tariffs on the auto industry could be costly to consumers.
These particular tariffs on Canada and Mexico, if they stayed in place a while, we would be looking at new cars going up in price, almost certainly by thousands of dollars. Car parts get more expensive, used cars, repairs, insurance get more expensive through ripple effects. The UAW, the Auto Workers Union, did put out a statement this week acknowledging the pain caused by tariffs, but also saying the working class felt the pain of NAFTA, and tariffs are a way to bring jobs to the U.S. by making it more expensive to manufacture overseas.
NPR's Camila Dominowski reporting. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. Some of St. Johns County's youngest artists will get a chance to show off their work when the annual All-County Middle School Art Show kicks off this Friday. The creations of 6th through 8th graders from across the county will be showcased at the St. Augustine Art Association Gallery in historic St. Augustine all month long. You can also view the student work online at the St. Augustine Art Association's website. It's staaa.org. Florida will take a closer look at companies whose shareholders include the state pension fund. Governor Ron DeSantis and members of the state cabinet backed a resolution that would expand scrutiny of corporate policies for possible woke ideology. The resolution came after the cabinet ratified a class action lawsuit filed last month by Attorney General James Uthmeier. It alleges Target Corporation did not properly disclose to investors the risks of a 2023 LGBTQ pride campaign that drew consumer backlash and caused a drop in the retailer's stock price. DeSantis considers that irresponsible behavior for the company.
People are free to do that on their own time, but if you have a fiduciary obligation to represent the shareholder interests, those tangents are not fulfilling that fiduciary obligation.
Previously, the state has targeted corporate initiatives involving environmental, social, and governance and diversity, equity, and inclusion standards. Windy and dry today here in Northeast Florida. Highs will reach the mid-60s with sunny skies.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Raymond James, a firm focused on transforming lives, businesses, and communities through tailored wealth management, banking, and capital markets solutions. Disclosures at raymondjames.com.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schendler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, what you need to know about a deadly measles outbreak as Florida reports its first case. Later in the program, Jacksonville University prepares to graduate its first class of law students. We talk to the founding dean about what the milestone means for the school's College of Law. But first, we are joined for our monthly house call by Dr. Joe Servin, Mayo neurologist and host of WJCT's Saturday show and podcast, What's Health Got to Do with It? Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Anna. So good to see you.
It is so good to have you, Dr. Joe. We appreciate you being here, especially with the news that is coming out about this latest measles outbreak. Talk to us about what do we know? What is the latest that we know about the status of this outbreak?
So it's doing what measles will typically do when it has an outbreak, which is it grows dramatically. We know that there are now more than several, I don't know the exact number at this moment, but certainly more than 100 cases up in Texas and bordering New Mexico. We know that there's been, thankfully, just one death. I say thankfully because there could be more. But what's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching about all of this is 2 points. Number one, it is completely preventable. We have a vaccine. This is a condition that was considered eradicated in the year 2000 in the U.S. We are not there right now. And the sad thing about this, it's growing in a population of people that have had declining vaccination rates.
You say it was eradicated or declared eradicated. Obviously, it still sort of exists. So what does it mean when a disease like that's declared eradicated, and what happened between then and now?
Yeah, so the reality is it was declared eradicated in the United States, but it isn't eradicated in the world. And we are very connected to other parts. You could pick up a nonstop flight from not too far from here, Atlanta, to almost any part of the world that may have pockets of the condition. Here's the thing about measles that doctors and providers always get nervous about. It is literally one of the most contagious viruses that we know of, period. It can linger in a person who has the virus, and let's say you have measles and you're in the room, and this always freaks me out, the air and the room are potentially contagious to anyone who goes in that room for up to 2 hours after the person has left the room, because the thing is so contagious and hangs out in the air, it hangs out on the surfaces. The other thing to know is that I don't know if folks remember when we were in the COVID throes, people would talk about the R naught number. That is, for every person who has a condition, how many other people can it infect? It's a theoretical number. For flu, that's about 1 or 2. That means for any infected person, you can infect 1 or 2 more. For measles, it's in somewhere in the theoretical range between 12 to 18 people per person with the condition. So it has this very dramatic way to spread because of the fact that the virus can come through the air on surfaces, and it's so contagious. And that's the thing you have to remember about it. And when it was eradicated, that's because we had good vaccination rates, and we weren't hearing cases where it was kind of breaking through. Now we're seeing more.
So, I mean, I guess doing the math, you say the last count that I saw was 159 cases. That was as of Tuesday. The CDC website is only reporting these every Friday, so we won't know until tomorrow.
Right.
The most recent figures, but I think if you just do the math on that, 18 times 159, that's a big number. I was really surprised when you talk about the contagion, though. I saw a stat that said that if there's an infected child in a class of unvaccinated children, the infection rate is 90%.
Yes. And it goes back to just the fact of just why it's so, just the virus has found a way to live in many different environments and surfaces. And if you're just talking about air in a classroom or something like that, it's very easy to jump to others. The other thing about measles that people forget, and this is a good reason we forget because we haven't had to deal with it, is the fact that how it presents at the beginning, it looks like a lot of other conditions. A dry cough, runny nose, maybe a fever.
Mm.
That's the beginning. But then if you take those 3, that's the beginning of everything.
Right.
So it's very hard to distinguish it. Everyone thinks of the rash. The rash is the last part. It's the other stuff, the coughing and all the stuff that happens before it, that's when people are spreading the bug. And that's why it's very easy to kind of make it spread. And when you have a bug that's so easily able to jump to others, this is why you got to knock this out.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Dr. Joe Servin. He joins us once a month for a house call here at WJCT. He also takes your calls and questions on any subject. So if you want to reach out to the doctor, you can call 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. We're talking right now about measles, the first reported case in Florida. Joe, a lot of people are seeing this as a kind of early test of this new Health and Human Services Secretary, RFK Jr., who has notably been an anti-vaxxer, I think it's safe to say. He actually wrote a book about the measles called The Measles Book, and I just want to read a line from it. He says, "Measles outbreaks have been fabricated to create fear." And then he continues, leading government officials to, quote, "inflict unnecessary and risky vaccines on millions of children for the sole purpose of fattening industry profits."
That's just, I have to respectfully disagree vehemently on that. This is a bug that, again, to tell that to the parents of the child who died because of this is just so heart-wrenching when you see that this is so preventable. Again, this is preventable. It's not like we don't have a treatment. When the person has measles, you can't undo it at that point, but you can prevent the person from getting it, or at least minimize how severe this can get. And this is where vaccines really are the tool. And even in the state of Texas, where this outbreak, that's exactly how they're managing it. I have to give kudos to those folks, the pediatricians and other teams, because that's precisely the area. This is happening during a change. I've seen some of the mentions where he talks about some of the folks who have it, and he encourages the vitamin A, cod liver oil.
What do you think about those as prospective treatments for measles?
So as a treatment, so once you have measles, you have measles. So as a treatment, when you have it, that's fine. We probably don't have too many other things to do. So strengthening your immune system with vitamin A, and cod liver oil, as I think was mentioned in an interview with him, sure, because that has plenty of vitamin A. That's good to boost your immune system. There's nothing wrong in that statement. What's missing is we can prevent it, that you can get a vaccine and you don't have to have it. So that needs to be paired with the extra message: get your vaccine. This is something that has been out for a while. This is a disease we just don't need to have around at this point.
I mean, those of us who had the vaccine before vaccine skepticism became such a big deal feel fairly immune. I don't know what our immunity rate is. And I also wonder, for people who don't have it, is it too late to get it?
So that's a fantastic point you're making. So as adults, it depends on when you were born in terms of whether you need a booster for it. If you were born between 1957 and 1968, it's very likely that you may have gotten the vaccine for measles, which was the one dose. Now, after 1968, there was a 2-dose regimen, which is really where you get that benefit. So if you are in that group, that may make you more likely to want to get that extra booster, if you will. But the people who really need to get the boosters that fall in that group are healthcare workers who may have the direct access to people who might have measles. And number two are if you're traveling in areas that a measles outbreak is occurring in. Right now, that's like a little portion of Texas. So that's, if you're going to definitely be there, be exposed, you're in health, and you were in that group, a booster may be helpful. Plus, if you're immunocompromised, if you're someone who doesn't have a good immune system.
Yeah, I want to say we did get an email from Nancy. She said, I was born in 1957. My husband was born in 1955, and we don't know if we've ever had a measles vaccine.
That's if you are in the, if you have not, there is never too late to get it. So that's the first thing.
Even now, if people are unvaccinated.
Even now, this is probably a good moment. And that's something that you can just talk to primary care. For me as a physician, one of the first things they ask is, I get even a titer, a blood test to make sure that I had like some type of measles immunity. This is something that can be quickly checked out. I'm not saying that you have to do that for all, but it is an easy thing to do. In terms of getting a vaccine or getting yourself checked, talk to the physicians. That's probably your best bet. It's a simple thing that can be just knocked out once and for all, and it is not a miserable vaccine to get.
We are enjoying a house call from Dr. Joe. We've got a question from John in St. Augustine. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Morning. Hi. I was wondering, whenever we see a report of a child that's died of measles, that's the end of the information regarding the child. And I was wondering if you know of anything related to comorbidities of the child, their general health profile. Were they a typical perfectly healthy child and they died of measles, or were they, overweight with other conditions, and it makes it a different context?
Yeah, John, that is a fantastic question and point you're making. In fact, it's funny you say that, because I remember when I read about this child, I had the exact same question in my mind. Is this someone who is immunocompromised versus not? To our knowledge, and mind you, I'm not the physician to the child who passed away, sadly. To our knowledge, the way it's being reported out, it was a previously healthy kid who did not have, at least reported out at this moment, any type of significant comorbidities or other conditions, who happened to be unvaccinated. And that's what we know. The way measles causes problems such as, where it gets to some point like that, are in two ways. First is that it can lead to pneumonia in kids. And sometimes if it's super contagious, that pneumonia is a serious condition that can lead to a fatality. The other way is if it actually affects the brain. It causes something called an encephalitis, that is literally a viral infection of the brain with measles. Those are the two ways that we know of that it tends to cause something as terrible as a death. But again, I'll go back. It's preventable.
Thanks for the call, John. I want to move on, Dr. Joe, now to a study that came out that connects. We know that sleep and health are related, but this was a really interesting look at how even a single all-nighter can
Right.
fundamentally change you at the cellular level.
Yeah, and this one got our attention, got my attention as well. We know that we've heard that people who miss sleep, who are sleep deprived, are more likely to get sick. We know it from surveys. They have more difficulty in fighting off bugs. This
And
was
anecdotally, sure, everybody's missed sleep and then gotten sick, right?
exactly like I think about a red eye or whatever type of condition that puts you in that situation. This was a study where they actually looked at the cells, the immune cells, a particular type, monocytes, which is the scavenger to look out if there are any bugs that are out there so it can attack it. And it occurs, and they looked at it because these cells tend to be more prominent in your sleep. Why? Because when you sleep, when you're kind of, I always think of like, when I arrive late at night at Jacksonville Airport, everything's being cleaned and everything's being ready for the next day. Well, your immune system's doing the same thing when you're sleeping, you're resting, and suddenly it's there scrubbing out any problems, any toxins and things of that sort. This told us that when college-aged healthy individuals in the study, when they had their immune system kind of examined for this particular cell type, who were sleep deprived on purpose just to see, it reduced their ability for these cells to function at their prime, if you will, by a pretty decent number, about 20-25%. We know, if we couple it with other studies that have shown that when you lack sleep, that you increases your risk for infection by 30%, it just tells you sleep is not just important just as a nice thing to have. It's an important thing to do and prioritize for your general well-being. We're talking about measles. We're talking about infections. Guess this is what grandma or parents told you. Get some sleep. There's a reason for it. Your immune system needs it.
Yeah. And they compared healthy individuals, as you said, with people who were clinically obese.
Yeah.
And there had been previous studies linking obesity to some of these same immune
That's right.
deficiencies. What did they find in terms of the healthy individuals versus the people who were clinically obese?
What was fascinating is that those healthy individuals, when they gave them that sleep deprivation for the day, the cells acted just like the folks that are obese naturally. So that have obesity, that is. And those who are overweight, obese, that their immune system, we know, can be impacted. That's part of what we call the metabolic syndrome. And the cells acted similar to that. And that just told us again how the immune system just takes a hit with this lack of sleep. And it's just another reminder that we need to prioritize sleep as just as important as anything else that we do for health.
We've got a call from Mark in St. Augustine. Good morning, Mark. You're on with Dr. Joe.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Joe.
Hey, Mark.
I'm a nurse with 20 years experience now, and when I was at nursing school, they made us get a lot of vaccines and shots, but I don't remember if I had the measles vaccine. And I'm 65, I'm still working, so I'm exposed all the time probably. If I go ahead and get another measles vaccine, will that in any way hurt me, or could it hurt me, or should I just go ahead and do it?
No, I would, Mark, that's a great question. There's two things that you could do. One is, since you are in healthcare, people do draw titers, especially for healthcare workers, and that is a titer just as a way to see if you have immunity. That's a quick test. That's something that even employee health might do at where you work because of where you work. Having said that, if you have not, if you're not sure if you've gotten the vaccine, there's no harm in this one. Again, this has been around for a long time. It is fairly straightforward, and given what you do, I would suggest that it's wise to do it, because we just don't know in this regard about when there could be a measles outbreak or anything along those lines. It sounds like you have a little bit of time, but you do have a couple of options there, especially in the work that you do.
Yeah. I want to ask, we were talking about sleep deprivation. We know that it as with obesity, that the chronic conditions associated with that can range from things like type 2 diabetes to heart disease to chronic inflammation. I wonder if you think that studies like this recent one will lead to any changes in either public health policy, or a lot of people work night shifts.
Yeah. I've had that question as someone who worked many a night shift, and my wife worked night shift as both nurse and physician on that issue for a long time. I think people are beginning to appreciate this reality. I hope public policy will follow, and I'm optimistic that it will. But even in my own profession of medicine, I see that, at least people are going into more shift work as opposed to going straight. So there are little small improvements. As we continue to do this, we will, my assumptions will continue to find that there are things that we're going to need to do to adjust to this reality to keep a workforce healthy. I don't know how this is all going to look policy-wise, but I suspect there will have to be change.
Another sleep-related issue that I want to ask you about, because this weekend, as we all maybe are aware, or perhaps some people are not yet aware, we reached daylight saving time.
Oh, and I let me just say it up front. I hate daylight savings time. I will say it very easily, and I'm going to say something political that I can't believe I'm going to do. If President Trump wants to make us all happy from an executive action, strike off daylight savings time. Just don't make us spring forward, because that'll keep us on a natural clock. And this is something I think most people would jump on. I lived in the state of Arizona for 24, 25 years. We did not do it. And I have to admit, I loved it. It was great not having to worry about that. And I think a lot of people are with me on this. I hate that springing forward, losing that hour of sleep, because as we were just talking about sleep deprivation, it does have an impact. And studies have shown that after daylight savings has been implemented, on the Monday after, there's a slight uptick in heart attacks and car accidents. What a surprise, because this just catches up with you.
It's interesting because there have been proposals, including here in Florida, I think, for a number of legislative sessions to get rid of the time change. But the movement is almost always towards let's keep daylight saving in place, meaning the darker mornings and the
Right.
longer days. What does the science say about trying to switch into that mode as opposed to what we currently are in?
We know that our natural body clocks, the rhythms of our body, are very aligned to sunrise, sunset. And so the way that it aligns best is what was called standard time. Standard time is the time that we are in currently, what happens in the winter. If we keep that, it's more of a natural flow of how we manage things. What's difficult is when you jump ahead, you have sunsets that go into the 8:30 p.m. range. In some places, and I was reading Alaska, I can go into 11 p.m. Things like that start to occur, and it just starts playing with your rhythms, with melatonin, ability to sleep. Keeping it where we are right now is actually the more natural way of flowing with our normal body clock.
And the healthiest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to move to a discussion that's more political. Before we do, I got an email from Mark. He says, no, we should not fall back. So I guess that's his position.
Okay.
This study that has followed, it was in the Journal of the American Medical Association that came out looking into the medical impact of recent political decisions around abortion. So they're looking specifically at states that have gone to a 6-week abortion ban, as it's known, basically limiting that window to 6 weeks. What did that study find about health outcomes for mothers and babies?
Well, to be honest with you, it's not too surprising. What it found is that number one is that it increased infant mortality rate. And number two, maternal mortality rates also went up in that study.
Why is that not surprising?
Because if you restrict abortion, and let's say for women that are doing it for all reasons, so you restrict abortion for whatever, let's say that if a baby has a congenital anomaly or problem, then suddenly, if you cannot have abortion on the table in that regard, that baby will be born, and when it's born, it may not have a long enough life that they can continue, that's viable, and as a result, the mortality rate goes up. The second piece to it is that women who are more vulnerable, they're more impoverished, or they don't have access to care, or they can't leave the state where they are because of cost or money, they end up carrying the child. They may not be as healthy. They may not have access to good prenatal care. And as a result, those women are more likely to have a complication and or a problem. And that is really why we see maternal mortality go up. We see infant mortality go up. Also, fertility rate went up because that's the number of extra births, and it went up pretty big rate. But that's obvious because you're not having abortion as an element in there. One other piece I will say about this data is that it is, although there were 14 states that were included because they were the ones that had the abortion bans at the time the study was occurring, most of these numbers really reflect the state of Texas, because the state of Texas is so huge in population. All the deaths and the problems seem to emerge from that. So it's a reflection if that state carried a larger weight of the numbers of the participants in the study, because they accounted for almost 90% as opposed to the other 13 states that were included in the analysis.
Yeah, and this study found that after the Dobbs decision, these bans resulted in about one additional birth for every 1,000 women. And in total, they found about 22,000 additional births and 500 more deaths, infant deaths.
Yeah, and again, the vast majority of those deaths again occurred in that state. But again, whether geography or not, what it just tells us is that there are a lot of reasons why people get abortions, and when you have this one size fits all, very restrictive element, you're carrying this child, and sometimes, again, those children will not make it, if you will, and or the mom just is not, because she is more vulnerable or has more complex medical conditions. There can be problems that increases those rates. If the baby survives, you increase the rate of fertility as well as the population. But on the other side of this question is that we don't know how long they survive for, and so any child that has something that may have been in a situation where they would not have made it through because of an abortion, now they make it, and that leads us to this issue.
I want to ask you, because you talked about congenital anomalies in children. When are those typically detected in a pregnancy? If we know that the 6-week abortion ban limits it to a 6-week point,
they unless it's very severe, you're not typically doing an ultrasound till way later than 6 weeks. And so by 6 weeks, you're not going to know some of that unless it's pretty overt or obvious. And so you're getting scans and things that sort several weeks after a 6-week ban. And that's why you're going to have pregnancies that have those outcomes.
and of course we've heard stories about people who've learned about a congenital defect in a child, but have had to carry it to term knowing that they probably wouldn't survive.
Exactly. And that's where those numbers really impact all of this. To me, the way I took it is that this is an example. This is, I did not find it surprising. This is what happens when that restriction occurs.
Is there any research into kind of what the impact is on a mother that is carrying to term a known or a likely unsuccessful childbirth?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's two ways to answer that. Psychologically, it can be devastating to know that, because it's just it's very, very painful, no matter what, from a psychological standpoint. From a physical, there are a lot of different possibilities. It just depends on the anomaly. It's hard to generalize in that type of circumstance, but suffice it to say, there are consequences that kind of emerge from this.
Well, it's a heavy subject, but I'm sure we'll be circling back as more research emerges on that. And it's great to see you, Dr. Joe. Thanks so much for being here.
And it is always a pleasure to be here with you.
What are you going to be talking about this weekend on What's Health Got to Do with It?
We are excited. We have got the CEO and president of Nemours Children's Health joining us to talk about What's going on in pediatric care? They signed a very interesting agreement in the state of Delaware, which could be a model for the rest of the country. Plus, we're talking to the president CEO of the Leon Institute. They do rankings of hospitals, but in a different way. They look to see equity and value and not just the typical U.S. News World Report element. I think it's a fascinating show this weekend.
Oh, interesting. Well, that airs, of course, at 4 o'clock every Saturday, and you can listen to the podcast at WJCT.org. Dr. Joe Servin is the host of What's Health Got to Do with It. Thanks, Dr. Joe.
Oh, such a pleasure, Ann.
All right. Up next, we ask the first graduates of JU's law school what it means to enter the legal field at this turbulent time. Welcome back. Well, the inaugural class of the Jacksonville University College of Law graduates in just a few weeks, 3 years after the school opened its doors. Here to tell us about how they're celebrating the milestone, I'm joined by the college's founding dean, Nick Allard. Good morning.
Good morning, Ann. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. I'm also joined by 3 graduating JU law students. Marisa, tell me, is it Materazzi?
Materazzi.
Materazzi. Kind of like a Maserati.
Yeah.
Materazzi. Lauren Fisher, welcome.
Thank you.
And AP Griffiths, welcome.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Thanks for being here. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
It's a
you.
big deal. You are part of a 14-person cohort that started at this school, Lauren. You are all still with it, and
Yes.
I think 13 have already placed some jobs
Yes.
in the
So,
field.
yes, including me. So I know after this graduation, I'm going to go ahead and go to Hall Booth Smith, and I'm going to be in civil defense.
At Hawley Smith, civil defense. And so is that the area that you want to go into? And do you have to kind of make that decision at this point as you're graduating, whether you want to go into civil or criminal, or is that all still kind of on the table?
Yes. So I wanted to go ahead and make that decision while I was in law school. I definitely believe I made that decision around 2L year. I know that really solidified my time during litigation while I was interning at a federal courthouse. And so, but yes, anytime during law school, you're able to go ahead and choose what kind of practice area you want to do. So yes, but my time, I know I learned it during 2L.
And Marissa, what have you chosen or have you chosen, and what goes into that decision, when you're deciding your future in law?
Yeah, so I will actually be going to the state attorney's office, and I'm going to be working as a prosecutor after graduation. I did not think that's what I was going to do after graduating. I spent the last 2 years working at an insurance defense firm, but realized that I wanted trial experience and I wanted to be a trial attorney. So the best way to do that would go to the state and be a prosecutor.
And when you get into that role, are you like thrown into the fire right away in county court handling kind of misdemeanor cases? How do you begin?
Yes, absolutely. So after we take the bar, we will spend about 3 to 4 weeks in an incubator style period. Well, we're going to go over training, basically how to try a case, how to be a prosecutor, all the different types of pleas and everything. And then once you're done with the incubator period and you get your bar results, you pass, and then you're thrown into the fire.
Yeah. AP, I think that the exams, are they in July?
Yes, ma'am. The end of July.
Okay. So what happens between now and then? We always hear about how difficult the bar exam is. Are you apprehensive? How do you prepare?
Well, I'm excited for the opportunity to take the bar. So after we graduate, there are bar prep companies. There are 2 big ones, are Barbary and Themis. You pick one of the companies, and then we spend the next 10 to 12 weeks really prepping for the bar. It's kind of like a review session for the entirety of law school. So it's a truncated version of all the stuff we've been learning, and we'll do it very, very quickly and thoroughly, long days, and hopefully that will help us to pass the bar.
But not sleep deprived, as we heard in our previous segment. You don't want to
No.
lose your immune system. Um, Dean Allard, first of all, this must be a very proud moment for you with these graduates having opened this law school. You're the founding dean. What does it mean to you personally?
It's extremely gratifying. My mother-in-law, bless her memory, would always say she's full of knockus and cavelling, and I couldn't be prouder. That's what that means. We had high expectations, and I'm just sitting here having an out-of-body experience listening to these very articulate, mature, aspiring lawyers, and we're just so proud of them. I would not trade one of them for a lawyer or any of our students at the law school for another student anywhere in the country, and I mean that. Maybe 2 or 3 of them, they know who they are, but not one of them. So yeah, we're particularly proud. We had said when they first started 3 years ago, it's amazing how fast it went, right?
Yes.
Crazy.
Long days, short years. I said that our biggest aspiration was that when anybody in Jacksonville met one of our students or graduates, that they were proud of them, and they were proud of them for their professionalism, their ethics, their intelligence and skill, but also their commitment. And these students, I think you can tell, have already hit that mark and gone beyond it. And they're very much committed not only to lawyers doing well, they're going to do well, but they're also going to do good. And that's a big part of who they are. So I'm very, I couldn't be prouder.
Lauren, I'm curious what your expectations were when you started law school, and what, if anything, was a surprise to you?
So one thing I would say that was a surprise, the writing. So one thing you'll learn in law school, you learn the IRAC method. So that's issue, rule, analysis, and conclusion. And so that's what you'll kind of go ahead and practice throughout law school when it comes to exams and even just writing essays. So transitioning from undergraduate over to law school, that was definitely something shocking. But yes, honestly, I really didn't try to anticipate anything while coming into law school. I just was open to anything and all possibilities and just learning new things.
Are you guys from Jacksonville, each of you, or did you come here from somewhere else?
I'm from Jacksonville.
Same.
I'm from Union County, which is close to Jacksonville.
Right. Was it important to you to go to school here locally and then work here locally? Is that something that you were aiming for from the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I chose Jacksonville University College of Law. The fact that I could be part of history and really be a trailblazer for my community was something that was a major selling point. And just to touch on that a little bit further, being from Jacksonville, it's really been eye-opening to see how the legal community has supported us. The Jacksonville Bar Association, the Young Lawyers Association, the Women's Lawyers Association, all of the legal organizations in Jacksonville have been extremely supportive and inviting us to different events and social gatherings from day one. So that just solidified why making the choice to go to JU was fantastic for me in my personal growth.
I mean, Nick, I think it's fair to say that the local legal community is delighted when there is a pool of capable students in the field of law that they can use, that they can rely on this pipeline of talent when they are looking for young up-and-coming lawyers.
Exactly right. I mean, their talent is an essential part of the economic infrastructure of any great city. This was the largest city in the United States that did not have a law school. And so, but they're also just very good teachers and mentors. They love law and they love their craft and they're so supportive. But also the city government and the people and the taxpayers have contributed to the success, and we're enormously grateful. We'd never forget that. And I hope everybody gets a chance to come by and look at our gorgeous new old building. It's the old Atlantic Bank building on Forsyth Street, in between the 7-Eleven and the best hot dog stand in Northeast Florida.
AP, I want to ask you, I mean, this is a changing time in the world of the legal profession. It's a turbulent time. A lot of perceptions changing about the field of law, about judges, about judicial independence, about the role of a prosecutor, the role of an investigator. How have you absorbed that changing reality? And how are you prepared to jump into a system where there is so much movement?
I will say that JU has prepared us very well to take on a changing environment. They've not just taught us the law, they've taught us how to adapt as the law changes, to adjust to changes in the law, to understand changes in the law, and also to understand that we are ultimately public servants. When we are sworn in after we pass the bar, we become officers of the court, and the fact that that not only has a professional meaning, but a public service meaning as well, is something that's been instilled in us from day one. So I would say that our training as legal professionals, once we hopefully all pass the bar, that has adequately prepared us for all the circumstances that change to help to instill the public trust in not only graduates of JU, but the legal profession more broadly, like Dean Allard says, to not just do well, but do good.
Yeah. But Lauren, there are concepts that have been instilled in you, I'm sure, from the very beginning about, the role of the Supreme Court, for instance, or the establishment of a legal precedent, I think what's called stare decisis, right? This idea that a law that has been ruled upon as constitutional is to remain that way unless something really dramatic changes, as opposed to just a reformulation of the court. Have you had any skepticism or concern about the way that interpretation of the court's impartiality has been brought into question?
I would say I don't have any questions about it at the moment, but I know in general, when it comes just the idea of stare decisis, that is something I know in the future we're possibly going to be able to change, especially as new lawyers coming into the future.
Mhm.
I feel like we can definitely have I think we can benefit and we can go ahead and improve the legal system.
Yeah. And are you going to be doing trial work yourself, or are you likely to be doing kind of behind the scenes stuff?
I will be doing trial work. So, starting off, I will be mainly doing a lot of work in the firm as litigation, but I know later on, as I start to go ahead and get more into my career, I'll definitely be in the courtroom.
And for people who aren't real familiar with the difference between criminal law and civil law, you're going to be working in a civil law firm. What is it that you're going to be? What kind of cases does that include?
Yes. So specifically, what I'll be focusing on is medical malpractice.
Okay.
So medical malpractice, premises liability, and also insurance defense. So that is usually on the civil side. So that's
Yeah.
what I'll be handling.
Marisa, I kind of want to steer that question to you as well, and probably to you too, AP. But I mean, there are changes in the interpretation of, judges, lawyers too. I think there was a time when lawyers really mostly had to be concerned about, being seen as ambulance chasers, but more to the current situation. There are questions about bias in the legal system. How do you think about that? How do you approach it as somebody just starting out?
Well, one good thing about choosing law as a profession is the fact that I have the ability to advocate for my clients to be able to change the law. One fascinating thing about the world of appellate advocacy, which one day I hope to move into after getting some trials under my belt, is the fact that I could change the law with the way that I advocate, the way that I write. And so to me, I think that's really neat about the legal profession as a whole.
And not everybody knows what the appellate work is, or how that's different from just working at a trial in the initial phase.
Yes, ma'am. So after a case goes to trial, either side can file an appeal. Basically, maybe a legal issue didn't go their way, or they felt bias from the court, and so they can issue an appeal, and that is brought to the appellate courts. And then normally specific attorneys who deal with appellate advocacy and appellate work, then they'll take the case on, and then they'll go and argue in front of the appellate courts regarding that specific issue on appeal.
And if successful, that is kind of where the law can change. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. AP, one of the things that's been in the news a lot is criminal justice reform. I don't know if you've decided which side of the law you want to go into. Have you made that decision?
Yes, ma'am. I'll be doing civil defense starting out and then hopefully moving into policy work eventually.
Okay. So criminal justice reform is an issue that will be top of mind for you as you're, working with defendants. Do you have any thoughts about the current way that we are prosecuting cases, or what we're choosing, who we're choosing to prosecute, and, pushes in some directions for lesser punishments for certain crimes or lesser sentences for certain crimes?
Yeah, there's definitely back and forth on that issue, especially in the state of Florida. I know you see in our local jurisdiction, you see a lot of even-handed prosecution. We are very blessed in the Fourth Circuit specifically to have excellent judges and excellent attorneys on both sides, on the public defender side and the state attorney side, that really are interested in justice. You see in some other places, it's not the same way. They will be arguing outside in the hallway. And I've had the honor to, while I've been in law school, attend a lot of pretrial conferences for criminal defendants. And you see judges who genuinely care about justice, not just upholding the law by its letter, but by its spirit, and doing what is good, not just for the community, but for the defendants in front of them. And so I think that obviously there are challenges, and we as young lawyers are the people who will be presented with those challenges and have to offer solutions. But I think that the future is bright with law students from JU being able to help solve those problems.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Good luck with the bar exam. Congratulations on graduating, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. And you can see we're going to be in good hands with these students in the future.
Of course. All right. We'll be back in just a minute.
AEG presents Il Volo. The captivating Italian operatic trio brings their 2025 world tour to Jacksonville's Moran Theater on Friday, March 7th. Tickets available at fscjartistseries.org.
The Jacksonville Music Experience presents Psych Soul Band Ghost Funk Orchestra performing live on the WJCT soundstage on Friday, May 2nd at 7 p.m. Tickets and more information at jacksmusic.org/JME events.
On the next Fresh Air, actor Simu Liu. He's best known for his breakout role as Shang-Chi, Marvel's first Asian superhero, and for playing a rival kin in the film Barbie. He now stars with Woody Harrelson in the new film Last Breath, about deep-sea divers who perform a life-saving rescue. Join us
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
From laptops to learning apps, schools spend billions of dollars each year on education technology. But does it improve student learning?
What does the use of these phones look like in classroom? What does wireless technology mean in school contexts? That research was conducted a decade and a half ago, and we are essentially having the exact same conversation.
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Abortion is currently banned in 14 states and restricted in 6 others. Across the country, the landscape for reproductive health has changed dramatically since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. Now, new data shows the initial consequences of that decision. We take a closer look next time on 1A.
Today starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, St. Augustine's Limelight Theater is celebrating its 33rd year with a show that harkens back to the 1920s. Here to tell us about it, the show is called The Drowsy Chaperone. I'm joined by Sherry Provence, the theater's executive director, who also plays the titular chaperone.
Yes, I do.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Jimmy Alexander, who plays the role of Robert Martin. Welcome, Jimmy.
Thank you.
So, Jimmy, you a character I think in this is the groom to be in this musical. It's a very ensemble type show, very lively. But your role is a pretty physical character. I mean, you're kind of the matinee idol, style character. But you have to really dance. Did you have to tap dance in this?
I do. I'm all over the place. It's the first few numbers. I mean, I just get drenched in sweat, and then I get some time to dry off a little bit. But yeah, it's a lot of physicality, and I definitely work for this one.
And you have some family members that are with you in this show. I was going to ask you kind of how you get the time from your daily life to participate in theater as much as you do, but I think you bringing your family along, it probably helps.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I got into theater originally because my wife, who's from New York, had been doing theater her whole life, and I was more of a musician. And she sort of brought me into this world probably about 15 years ago now, and I just totally fell in love with it. And I missed her. She was doing shows, and she wasn't there. So I'm like, well, let me get involved with this. And then, that just sort of started me on my journey. So it's great. Yeah, my oldest daughter, Kayla, is there. And my new son-in-law of about a year, Ronnie, is doing the show as well. So it's great.
That's excellent. And Sherry, you play the drowsy chaperone, as we said.
Yes.
A little bit of a tipsy chaperone. But tell us why you wanted to stage this in the first place and a little bit about your character.
Yeah, that's a great question. So The Drowsy Chaperone is it's a silly, campy musical. And I put it in the season because I figured that coming out of the holidays and the wintry cold, it doesn't get too wintry here in Florida, but cold enough for me.
It's been gray and
It
cold,
has
though.
been. It has been. It's a great place to have something fun and frivolous. And I knew the show. I knew that it was just a really funny, lighthearted show, and I thought it would fit really good into our season. I'm playing the drowsy chaperone who is just ridiculous. And she, I think Carol Burnett humor. And so I just really get to lean into that. It's a departure from what I do every day in the administrative role of the theater. And so I'm just having a blast. And the cast is exceptional, and they're fun to be with. And it's just been a really good experience.
And tell us a little bit about the conceit of the show, because although the music is from the 20s and the style of the show is from the 20s, it's sort of set in like a modern era.
is, yeah.
Explain how we get to the past.
It's a play within a play. And essentially, the premise is that there's a kind of an antisocial man that hides away from others and listens to his old records. And he loves musicals. And this is his favorite. And he engages, breaks the fourth wall, engages the audience, kind of talks them through this musical that comes to life on stage as he's talking about all the things that he loves about the show. And literally the characters come out of his refrigerator.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's delightful.
Yes.
Jimmy, you've done some previous performances at Limelight. I think you were in Little Miss Sunshine.
I was. Yeah, it was about a year ago.
And you've also been in Rocky Horror. Is that right?
Yeah, my first show ever actually was playing Rocky as Rocky Horror, which is quite a shock when you're new to theater and your first time on a stage. You're wearing these little gold shorts and nothing else. It was quite quite interesting.
Trial by fire.
Exactly. Yeah.
What is fun about this project in particular?
For me, I've done a lot of stuff in a lot of different theaters and a lot of different projects, but I always felt like the Limelight was always different. It always had a special sort of feel, and just like the family that they have there and the people that they bring, it's just always been very special to me. And with this particular, some people may disagree with this, and we've got a great director, and she's done a great job. But for me, like a key component to any show is the casting.
Mhm.
And I think our director chose the right people. We really don't have any
You're
weak
not
spots.
biased because you've got 4 family members total, right?
That's true.
She did a
That's
great job
true.
casting.
She did. Great job. But, this just the way that we work together and how much, a couple of the patrons said it the best. They said they look like they're having so much fun. And we're not, that's not an act. We're just having a lot of fun, and the way that we play off of each other, we're all having a ball. And I think that's reading, and that's why people are liking it so much.
Yeah. And Sherry, this is, as we said, the 33rd year of
33rd,
Limelight,
yeah.
which is the only year-round community theater in St. Augustine.
Yes,
Yeah.
with a building, I should say.
With a building, yeah. So if folks are interested, I think this, when does this open?
So we are 2 weeks in.
Okay.
We've done 2 weekends of shows, and we are back at it tonight. There are tickets available, so we do 2 more weekends. So I'd love to have people come out and see it. It's just an escape, and that's kind of the message of the show.
Yeah.
An escape to another world. But with still a lot of, I would say, sentimentality.
Yeah. Well, you can get tickets at limelight-theater.org. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Sherry Provence and Jimmy Alexander, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us, Ann.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you for listening. That's our program. If you have questions or comments, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. Join us tomorrow when our Friday Week in Review panel discusses the latest headlines from local Doge casualties to improved medical care at the jail. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.